Today I have with me Zoe McCauley. Zoe is a senior clerk at Great James Street Chambers. And I've known Zoe a few years because Zoe used to clerk me when you were a clerk at Farringdon Chambers. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right, when I first started out.
Yeah, my God, that was how long ago?
Almost 15 years ago now.
Oh my God, time really flies, doesn't it? 15 years. So you started off as a junior clerk and you now are the senior clerk. Fantastic.
Yes.
All right. Well, look, I'm so glad that you agreed to be interviewed because I have so many questions that I've always been afraid to ask clerks. So now I feel
Ask away.
Okay, brilliant. So, first of all, I want to ask you about why you decided to become a clerk.
The honest answer is I don't know. And very oddly, years ago when I was, we were clearing out my granddad's house and I found a scrapbook from when I was 6 years old, and I opened up the scrapbook and inside it says that I want to be a barrister's clerk. Now I have no idea, and I still don't know to this day, and nor does anyone in my family, where I would have got the idea of barrister's clerk or even known what that was. No one in my family was in clerking or in the legal system, so I've no idea. I must have watched something on TV about it. And then as I got older, it became more of a case of I want to be a barrister as opposed to barrister's clerk. And I went through a phase of that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do my law degree and I wanted to become a barrister. And I only changed back to clerking when I hit college and I was doing my A-levels, and I just had enough of the education system. I decided that alongside my A-levels I was going to do a legal administration course, and that kind of led really nicely into clerking, which meant I got the best of both worlds. I still got to be involved in the criminal system, but just in a different perspective, that was all.
Are there any particular qualifications that clerks have to have? You talked about a legal administration course.
Yeah, there aren't. It's more of an on-the-job learning experience, I find, with clerking. There are qualifications you can do. There's a clerking, I think it's like a BTEC or something like that you can undertake. I didn't do that. I just decided to take the route of start at the bottom and try and work my way up. And most clerks, I think you'll find, probably do it in a similar sort of way.
Yeah, that's been my experience. And I also realised, well, I've always had the impression that most clerks come from Essex. And just before our interview, I asked you, where do you live? And you said Essex, and I just thought, I can't believe this. What is there something in the water? What is it about Essex and clerks?
I don't know the answer. I actually asked the same question to a good friend of mine who used to be a senior clerk at one of the biggest sets of chambers. And we went for lunch a couple of weeks back and I asked him the same question. And I said, why is there so many of us from Essex? Because he's also an Essex lad. And I think it comes down to connections, because I think in the clerking world, a lot of it is who you know, not what you know. And I think what tends to happen is it's all about someone you know is a clerk, they introduce you, you end up going in and doing a bit of work experience here and there. And I think it is more about, it's always traditionally been, I mean, it's Essex and Kent. Yep. I think they're the two counties that have got probably the highest number of clerks. But yeah, I think that's probably where it stems from. Is it's often family members. You'll have to follow in your family's footsteps, I think. And I suppose in a way, it's kind of a lot of what we do is gift of the gab and being a bit cheeky and being a bit sociable, if you like. And I think there's something about Essex that gives you that.
No, absolutely. So what do barristers' clerks actually do?
good question. I get asked this a lot, and I think the only thing that I can kind of compare it to is it's an agency, if you like. So the clerking team is there essentially to look after the practices of our barristers. So for those people that don't understand what a chambers is, we're a central hub where a barrister will join as a member of chambers, and the clerking team then generates the work for the barristers. We bill for the barristers, and barristers are self-employed, so what tends to happen is that the barrister will pay a commission or a rental agreement to chambers for the clerking service, and it's likened to an agent. So we are the middleman, if you like, between the solicitors and the barristers, and our connections with the solicitors allows us to pass on the work that the solicitors generate to the barristers to go to court and do the representation and advocacy. So it's kind of agency work, if you like.
So how do you develop those connections with the solicitors, Zoe?
It's a lot of networking. The majority, I always say to people, my job is becoming friends with people, because that's effectively what I do for a living. It's about years of building up relationships with firms, with solicitors, individual solicitors, and just building that up over the years. And it may be that your solicitors are loyal to an individual barrister, and then it becomes more about maintaining the relationship between them, and just making sure that you give a really good service, really. I'm a bit of a stickler for efficiency and admin and things like that being on point. So my priority is always to make sure that whatever work we get for every solicitor, that we make sure it's handled perfectly so that the solicitor's happy, and then the work comes back naturally. Because if they're happy with what you're doing as a chambers and with the individual barristers that you have, they'll come back.
So you've talked about just developing these relationships with solicitors, making sure that they're happy, and you've talked about having to network, and I imagine socialise with them on occasion. Is that right?
Yes.
Is that quite a big part of your job, socialising?
Not so much anymore. It used to be, if you watch the likes of Silk on the TV show, you'll see Billy, the senior clerk there, who spends the majority of his time in the pub. Now, the older generation will remember those days, as I do, watching senior clerks do their best work in a pub setting. We've kind of moved on a little bit from there, I like to think. There is still an element of that involved, and we still do socialise, and we have to do that side of things as well. But I think that the profession as a whole has shifted slightly now into a much more business-minded model.
Right.
And I think that's probably only come in the last few years, really. But I think people are now starting to look at it in a slightly different way, that the old school sort of clerking is not necessarily the only way of doing it. It's, I'm not saying it doesn't work, because it does for many, and there's still a lot of old school senior clerks out there that will be able to generate work in that way. But yeah, our chambers is slightly different. Our focus is not always on the social side of it. It's much more business minded.
Right. So you've developed these fantastic relationships and connections with solicitors. So I want you to spill some gossip now. What are solicitors' pet hates as far as barristers are concerned?
Pet hates, I would say lack of communication. One of the biggest things that I find annoys solicitors is not getting attendance notes on time, not getting that phone call once you've left court to let them know what's going on. Perhaps barristers not being quite as humble as they should. I think I don't have it so much where I am now. I have previously had where I've worked before, occasions where barristers could probably have been a little bit more humble. And I think that's a kind of, it's a personality trait that you might not be able to necessarily change. But I think one of the things that I've drummed into our barristers at our chambers over the years that I've been there is that we're a team ultimately, and it's not about you and I or what I've done, or it's about we always. And your solicitor is part of your team, as is everybody else involved, whether that be the paralegal or, you know, even the receptionist opening the door, any of that. It's all part of that one team. And I think if you treat people, everybody, with a bit of respect when it comes to that, I think that you're on for a winner, and the solicitors will enjoy working with you much more than they will if you are that barrister that thinks you know everything and that you're right and everyone else is wrong.
When you think about the most successful barristers in chambers that you clerk, what qualities do they have that make them easy to clerk and so successful?